Good evening and welcome back for the last time this series to the Forum on Sports Tonight Live. Now, I'm very privileged tonight having the studio as my guest. Firstly, the former Olympian and world rowing champion Toby Garber, the Evening Standard leading sports writer James Olley, and the chief executive of the London Marathon, and so much more besides, which no doubt he will tell you as the evening goes on, Nick Patel. But this show is all about you. Please feel free to contact us. We'll be very lonely sitting here on our own, so do get in touch. On Skype, STL-broadcast, via Twitter. So you can tweet us on Twitter at SportsNightTV, or you can do what I'm not sure that many people do anymore, which is phone us on 0207 291 0868. I'm looking forward to a stimulating 2 hours on the hot topics of sport in Britain today. Well, I guess the hot sport in Britain, collection of sports in Britain today, is all about the Olympics. Toby, a former Olympian, excited?
Yeah, well, I can't wait, and it's going to be interesting actually, because as an Olympic athlete, I get the chance to be excited and then do my sport. So you get it out of your system. This time round, I'm going to be watching it, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get it out of my system.
And you've been there. Does that heart pump when you look at...
Absolutely. You mentioned former Olympian, but the beauty about it is actually you're Olympian for life, and it's a fantastic experience, and it's something that I try and instill in all the children I go around doing talks to, and it's absolutely a fantastic experience.
I'm sure people are going to want to listen to you a lot tonight. James, you've been around London and London sport a lot the last few years. This is a moment, isn't it now?
It's incredible. It's London's moment to shine, isn't it? I think, you know, from a football perspective, I've covered European Championships and World Cups, and I went to the Olympic Park earlier this week to get my accreditation, and I think it's only when you walk around the park you suddenly get a scale, an idea of the scale of this and the size of it. And I think people who are interested in tournaments, whatever sport they may be, will just not appreciate how big this is until it gets going. In the opening ceremony tomorrow night, I'm sure it'll be something special, and then we'll really feel that Olympic atmosphere sort of hopefully right across the country, not just in London.
Yeah, because Nick, we've sort of had a lot of negatives thrown around, but essentially with one sleep to go, although we have won a game before the opening ceremony, which I think is quite cool. One day to go. I feel a lot. I'm delighted. I feel a lot of positivity in the air.
Yeah, I mean, every Olympic Games goes through these phases, though. There's the doubters and the naysayers, and that always happens, whether it was in Sydney or Beijing or anywhere. But we're seeing that stop and fall away. And I was actually at the stadium last night for the technical rehearsal. Absolutely fantastic. It's going to blow the world away. And it really is an exciting time to be in London. Just walking around today, I was in the Olympic Park, as I say, yesterday in the triathlon venue today. Fantastic feeling of people really ready to go.
I think there's going to be maybe about 8 weeks of this, haven't we, as well? How amazing. Yes. Right, we're going to get straight into our first questioner, a gentleman called Gareth Flavell. Have I pronounced your name right, Gareth?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, Gareth, you're very welcome. What would you like to ask us?
I'd like to know if you guys think it's right that the lottery funding or part funding the Olympics while community organisations are suffering due to lack of funding.
Well, it's interesting, really, Toby, isn't it? Because there's been a lot of talk about legacy.
Yeah.
And I personally thought, I've been to the site, I think the regeneration is amazing. Beyond the money, is there going to be a legacy here?
I mean, I feel that that's really part of my job as being an ex-Olympic athlete, is now to really try and inspire the younger generation. And we obviously put a lot of things on monetary value, whether, you know, is it going to be my athletic stadium, what facilities are we going to have in the country, who can use them? And I understand that there's a controversy about that. But what's really important for me is to make sure that the kids get really inspired. And, you know, I was at the Watford Athletic Stadium today. I've been over in Eton today with some rowers, and everyone is so excited. I was over in Middlesex last week at the school, watching them do on a play rehearsal with the Olympic torch, a little song, and they're just so inspired. And for me, that's what it's all about.
Will it last, Tim?
I think it will, definitely. Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
It's not going to be one of those that just, you know, we're here and then it's a bit like, you know, if we get I'm using this as a colloquial, if we get a badminton gold, everyone plays with their shuttlecock for 3 weeks, and then it disappears down to page 27 somewhere nowhere. Are we going to continue the sporting legacy?
When I first started out, I went down to a rowing club and I got an opportunity, and I went down there. The equipment was absolutely minimal. We had a couple of rowing machines, but one of the athletes down there was Steve Redgrave. So the inspiration was watching him train and saying, oh, can I do that? It wasn't about the equipment, wasn't about anything else. It was just trying to emulate someone else. And that's what I'm hoping. Now we've got a situation, we've got thousands of people going to be able to watch hundreds of our athletes do that within over 2 weeks.
I think you're right, personally. I think there's a very good chance people will. And if, James, if London gets behind this sentiment and the government and the local authorities back sport now as opposed to cutting budgets, I'm not making a political stance here at all, but there's been a lot of playgrounds that have been sold off recently, playing fields that have been sold off recently. I mean, you've reported around London sport, as I said a few minutes ago, a lot. Do you feel that sentiment, or does your newspaper get worried that this is going to dissipate?
I think it's something that we actually probably see it with Wimbledon. That's not a bad example to use. Each year, tennis comes to the country for kind of a month. We have Queen's, and then we have a sort of week's build-up, and then we have 2 weeks of Wimbledon. And then you go to the parks, the tennis courts are full, sort of a week or two after Wimbledon, particularly if Andy Murray does well, as obviously he did this year. And then, as you say, it kind of falls away as the year goes on. And the challenge now for the BOA and everybody involved in sorting out the legacy is to capitalise on that. And I think, you know, if you look at the way the Olympic torch has just inspired people.
That's been remarkable, hasn't it? I have to say, I've watched it, I've been there on a couple of occasions. It really has been an uplifting experience.
It's been incredible. And, you know, you've just seen communities...
My wife cried so often.
There you go. Communities just coming together, you know, to see this Olympic flame, to see how it's sort of bound people together. That is what they now have to capitalise on. That sentiment, it's clearly there, and this is before the things even started. You know,
Fantastic.
It's clearly there.
And your paper's been very supportive of that.
Yeah. Well, you know, because it's a massive time, obviously, for everybody in London, and for the London Evening Standard, very much so as well.
Now, Nick, I know this is a little difficult for you because I know you sit on legacy committees. See, I told you he's involved in so many things. You'll see over the next couple of hours. But as impartial as you can be, your thoughts about the legacy that will be left behind.
One of the reasons we won the Olympics was on the back of both a hard legacy, which is renovating a rundown part of London, but also on the soft legacy, getting people to do more sport, the inspirational part of the Olympics. And it's a very difficult task because no one really has managed that very well in any previous games. You always see a bit of a bounce afterwards.
Is there one that you say has managed that well?
Well, in the soft legacy, I think it's very difficult to see it. But actually, London and Britain is already showing that we can do it. There are 1,300,000 people more doing sport now every week than when we won the game. So we're already seeing part of that.
And that's partly because...
And that's partly because, I mean, the question that Gareth raises is a very good question about sports funding. One of the things that I think having the Olympics has done is really has helped keep up the level of funding for sports. I'm on the board of Sport England, so we are the main distributors of funding to sports clubs, and you know, I can spout all the statistics about 850 clubs getting £70 million from the Inspiration Fund and £2 billion going into sport. But the fact is that we've been fairly fortunate because the lottery has actually been going up, amazingly. More people are playing the lottery, more money is coming in. So sport is probably one of the only parts of government funding, if you take government to include lottery funding,
which is actually
that hasn't been that badly affected. The problem, however, is that the sector that is actually the biggest funder of sport in this country is local authorities, and they have had quite substantial cuts, and that's where the pressure is coming from a lot of these local clubs.
Okay, let's go back to Gareth for a second. You asked the question, the three gentlemen opposite me have given you some reasonable food for thought. What's your conclusion of where you think this legacy may be or may not be afterwards?
Well, I'm not quite as excited about the Olympics as your guests, unfortunately. Mainly because I work for a youth organisation called Exposure in North London. We develop young people and make them more employable through media skills, essentially. But why this is a particular issue for me is because Labour took about £670 million from lottery funding, 425 million of which came from the big lottery fund. the Big Lottery Fund has probably got no supports charities and community organisations throughout the UK. Now, the Conservative government before, the Conservative opposition states that this shouldn't happen. Essentially, it shouldn't be taken away from community organisations doing good work. The same Hugh Robertson MP, he said the other day on Radio 4 that £500,000 would be returned to the Treasury. We're the Exposure and the Big Lottery Refund campaign are arguing is that at least some of that money should be returned to the country so they can continue to support community organisations.
Okay, Gareth, I'm going to have to hold you for a second, only because the quality of the line is not that great. I know I've just left you, Nick. Can I come back to you?
Yeah.
And just say he made a lot of valid points.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's absolutely right. The part of the funding for the Olympic Development Agency came from top slicing from the lottery, and that meant that not just the big lottery, but also Arts Council and everyone else had a top slice taking over from them. But part of the contract with the legacy company who will be responsible for the developing out of the Olympic Park, is that money, after the first chunk of money goes back to the government, that money goes back into the lottery. I'm on the board of the legacy company, so
As you're on the board of the legacy
I feel
company,
quite...
just give us the top line, because I think the legacy company is a really interesting item here.
Yes.
And a lot of people talk about the legacy, but they tend to talk about it in terms of what's left behind and will West Ham take over the stadium, etc.
Yeah.
But what's the agenda for the legacy company going forward?
Well, we're trying to create a brand new district of London, 14,000 new homes, many of those to be family homes.
That's not necessarily just sport, that's just living
absolutely. Sport is only
lifestyle.
part of our remit. Actually, the biggest part of our remit is the convergence story, which is that, I mean, my father was born in that area, just about 600 yards from the stadium. It was, and still is, one of the poorest parts of London, one of the poorest parts of the country, and yet it's surrounded by some very wealthy parts. And the story that we're trying to do is to bring up, to converge that into the rest of London by building new homes, new jobs.
Well, I've actually seen it. James, I mean, what Nick said is actually happening. I mean, I've seen that. I mean, should we not just be, at the moment, very proud that the heads of terms, if you like, that Seb and the team announced 7 years ago, we are ticking the boxes now.
Yeah, well, I think the legacy is obviously a very important issue. I think that when you, from a personal experience, when I go back to maybe something like the 2010 World Cup, and you look at South Africa that had these fantastic stadiums built in very, very poor areas. You know, that is these white elephants that essentially became, you know, months after the games, this is what they became, these fantastic stadiums that were not used, that were not maximised. That's the thing that we need to avoid with this kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And are you fearful on the sporting side of this equation, that the interest will come, the interest will slowly wither on the vine?
Well, it is hard work, and I sort of feel in some ways I sort of work on the front line, sort of listening to your caller that called in. I also do some work for Centrepoint through the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust. And, you know, we're dealing with kids, you know, drug addiction, homelessness and those kind of things. And, you know, I go in every single week and you sort of say, you know, Olympic athlete, and you go and do a talk and do some fitness. And, you know, I can see it takes a long time, and it wasn't until the other week I went in, and I've been going in for 2 months, that he suddenly clicked. He went, all right, you were at the Athens Olympics, I play that on the, I play that on the computer console. And then he was inspired because he could relate to it in a better way. So I appreciate it. Sometimes it takes that. But, you know, I did a talk a couple of months ago, and today I saw this child, and after the talk I did today, and he goes, it was on a rowing course, and he goes, oh, you came into my school a couple of months ago. I said, oh yeah, that's right, yeah, I went to that school. And he goes, oh, well, after I heard your talk, I've decided to come on this rowing camp.
Fabulous.
So there he was, doing exercise there, sport he'd never done before, because his school didn't do it.
And that's really
that was
the
great.
core, all those answers. Gareth, we're going to try and pop back to you. I mean, I'm heartily encouraged by all three answers and from three guys who kind of know what they're talking about. Does that make you feel a little bit easier about it all? He says, twisting your arm up your back.
Sort of. I mean, one of my big issues with the legacy is how this money would be repaid back. It was never, you know, we're taking it from the lottery and that's it. It was good. The money is going to be repaid back. The government are saying at some point in the 2020s, probably by 2025, and by that time, 10,000 community organisations wouldn't have got funding. That's 8 million beneficiaries from money that has gone to an event that really is lasting 2 weeks. And we're talking about millions and millions of people that are going to be affected. I don't want to be a downer a couple of days before the Olympics started, but I'm working for an organisation that's directly affected by this, and very few people are talking about it.
Let me ask you then, we've got to go to break in a minute. Let me ask you before we let you go, Gareth, then, what, if you can say it simplistically in a couple of sentences, would be your answer to your issues?
Simply to give back the money, that the underspend that there is there, the £500 million, according to Hugh Robertson, £500 million to be returned to the lottery so that they can continue to do the work that they do.
I mean, the other thing is that when we sell off the land, and we just announced the first sell-off of part of the Olympic Park to the first phase of homes, that money will have to go back to the lottery, because that is the contract that we've entered into to do that.
So
But as Gareth said, that is going to take time.
And it's a time we have, though. I mean, there's no urgency on this. I mean, if we walked away with a successful Games, which I sincerely hope and believe that we will, and we deliver this to a community over a 10, 20-year period, that's a huge success. I know there's a couple of funding issues here and there. Don't want to minimise them, but that's, in the overall scheme of things, that's small, isn't it?
Well,
Or
I
is that a
think
major issue?
it's never small if you're the one that's affected, and I do understand that, as Gareth has said. But if we can manage this, we will be really the first Games that's ever managed to pay money to use these facilities in the long term. There have been some examples. I mean, Barcelona, if you've been there, is quite a decent example, but they're few and far between. I think we've got a chance of being a real model for the future for these type of major games.
Well, look, Gareth, thank you. It was a very intelligent question, and I hope we've allayed some of your fears. There's obviously going to be issues going forward. It looks like, sadly, you might be one of the issues. I sincerely hope. Well, you've certainly made a friend with Nick in the studio, so without giving out his phone number, you could probably contact him at some point and see if he can help. But having said all of that, it's a thoughtful point, and I think that should be borne in mind.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Overall, you're very welcome. We have to go and earn the station a little bit of money, so don't go away. We'll be back in 2 minutes, 3 minutes even. See you soon. You're very welcome back to the forum with Tony Garbett, James Ollie and Nick Bittell. And I have to tell you that Team GB have scored, and just a couple of the discussions we had here on the programme the other week when we talked about David Beckham and perhaps he should have replaced Bellamy in the squad. Guess who scored? Yep, it was Bellamy. So, we've had some discussions about the legacy. What about the sporting issues? I think LOCOG's probably going to do a remarkable job. I think it'll be well organised. Do you feel that the legacy that not so much the legacy, do you think that the sporting history that we're managing is going to be well protected by the London Games? James, what do you think about what's going to happen here
in
and how it's
terms
going to
of
be run?
medal halls and
Yeah, medal hall and how the games are going to be run, and just let's talk about the sport itself now for a minute.
well, I think the target for Team GB is 48 medals. I think that's
I
right.
read 29 somewhere today, but you know, somewhere between 29 and 48 will do, I guess.
I think it's 48,
Okay.
and you know, I think our traditional strengths from the research that I've done and the people I've spoken to about it seem to be likely to hold firm. I think the cycling team is going to be very strong again. The boxing team looks quite strong this time around.
If we didn't hit that target, would everyone feel that this
I think it's
has been a negative position for us to
well,
be in?
it would be.
Are we under pressure, in other words, to really perform?
It would
we're
be
at
a
home?
stick to beat the Olympics with, wouldn't it? I mean, look, I mean, people judge everything in sporting terms and purely in terms of success, and obviously medals are the ultimate test of that at the Olympics. I think if the Olympics are well run, I think if they're you know, played out and contested in the right spirit, and of course if Team G win plenty of medals, then I think everybody would be pretty happy.
Are we going to do in rowing, Toby?
Our best ever.
Best ever.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. definitely. If you go back to the history of rowing, going to Atlanta '96 Olympics, we brought one Olympic gold medal back, and that was in rowing. And I think it's been a slow drip feed, and it's fantastic. Now we can produce a team that can almost make finals in most of the disciplines within rowing, whether it's in a sculling boat for a single, or whether you're in a pair, a four, or a quad. So I think it's an absolutely fantastic opportunity to be our best games. Yeah.
Well, there's a guy on the screen behind us called Jez. Hello, Jez. I nearly preempted what I think you're going to ask. So fire away at our lads and let's see what they've got to say.
I mean, my question is, why does Britain do so well in the cycling and the rowing only, the sit-down sports, and why are we so poor in the other sports? I mean, is it the antiquated old fogey system we've got prevalent in the FA, the lawn tennis? Is it just our whole developmental structure? I mean, what do you think?
There was, Toby, actually something, thank you, Jez, there was something said at one of the games, I can't remember if it was post-LA or Seoul, we do well in the sit-down sport. Some foreign nation
But
had a pop at us. To
do
say
we?
that,
I mean, do we care? On my
No, we
head,
don't.
on my front, on my back, on my. Gold medal is a gold medal. I'll have that. Thank you very much. With whatever, wherever position I'm going to be in. So, I mean, I think we've done fantastically. And, if we look at those two sports, rowing and cycling, you wouldn't say they're easy sports. I mean, the cardiovascular base you need for both of those sports is immense. And you don't suddenly turn from one sport to another just like that. You're looking at least 2 Olympiads, really, to get the cardiovascular system to be able to do those
I'm going to
sports.
focus on you a little bit, if you don't mind,
Okay.
for a few minutes. These two guys can have a couple of minutes off. I am immensely fascinated by this. I mean, fortunately, I've been quite close to many top sportsmen over the years. And to see the training programs of these guys and what they really put into it. I mean, you look at, somebody told me the other day, Bradley Wiggins is what, he's 6'3",
6'3", yeah.
and he weighs about 10 stone.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you maintain a fitness program? And I'm being very general. How would you manage a program that has to derive immense power, immense stamina, and keeps you immensely slim? How do you do that in a few sentences? I don't know how you can explain that.
Basically, just do a lot of it every single day of the week. I mean, the rowing regime when I first started out,
But there's nutrition as well.
Of course it is. It was 2 sessions a day. But I can tell you a story that I used to have to do bar work before the lottery funding came in to earn money to be able to go to training, and I was in the supermarket. There was a supermarket right next to the Dorney Lake, actually, because I remember training there, and I was weighing up what to buy to eat. So you look down the supermarket aisle, and at that time, my nutrition sense wasn't that great. For £1, you can buy 10 donuts. So what do? I'll take that. And I'm in a situation where I can eat 6 before the first session, have 4 after the next one, and then go again and again. But it's not the best thing to eat.
Because it's sugar-based.
It's totally sugar-based, and obviously, you're burning 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Okay, so
and it's a chore. It's a chore to eat that amount. And I'm not agreeing with how you should eat, and that's not what I do now. And it's one of the things I talk about is making sure you nutritionally eat. But I could get away with doing that to my body because you just burn so many calories.
A lot of people that watch this programme they play Sunday football or whatever they might do. How would you best encapsulate a nutrition programme, not a whole programme? I mean, should you balance out by eating sugar? We're always told sugars, sweets, all these sort of things are bad for you. I mean, is a little bit of bad good for you?
It's really interesting, actually, because there's been a lot of sports drinks on the market at the moment, and I've been working in the schools, and all the kids have got these sugary sports drinks. And to be honest with you, you don't need them. It's great advertising, great marketing for the sports drink, but a lot of the time, if you're doing something in the park for 30 minutes to an hour, yes, you've got to stay hydrated, but I personally don't feel you need a really sugary drink. If you want to make your own sort of like electrolyte drink, a little bit of salt, a little bit of a sweet squash or a fruit juice, 50%, and that's really all you need. And you can make your own homemade one, or you can go and buy one for £3 down your local supermarket. But most of the time you don't. But if you're an athlete and you're burning 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day, that's a lot of eating, and you've got to replicate sometimes 4 training sessions a day. So you can't afford to eat because you've got to find another way of getting it in. So then you do it through liquid. So sometimes you can be drinking a litre and you've got the best part of maybe 400 calories, 350 calories in a litre of made up protein and carbohydrate. and if you've got to, then go again, then you can still do it on your tummy, but you can't do it if you're always eating full meals. So that's a good way of getting around it.
James, I was just going to say, just talking about the nutritional side of it, and trying to get that message to kids. We hear about the rising obesity in England and across other countries. How difficult is it, therefore, to get that message through when you've got the Olympic Games, two of whom's principal sponsors are McDonald's and Coca-Cola?
Yeah. I know it's
Cadbury's.
And Cadbury, of course.
Cadbury's. I know it's crazy, and you're in the Olympic Village, and you've got this McDonald's, which is like a 100-metre long counter, and it's like absolutely massive, and you're like, well, how does this work out? And it's a double-edged coin, isn't it? You sort of need the funding to be able to put on the events, but at the same time, you don't want to take it down the route of influencing young people and children.
Let me take that.
And it's a hard thing to do.
I think it's a very good point. Let me just take that, and I know, being chief executive of the marathon, you've had sponsors, but you've always erred on the had the ability to choose a very healthy sponsor. I mean, but you are a sports administrator as well. Necessary evil? These people, not evil. Necessary supporter.
You are not going to put on a major tournament, be it football or Olympics or anything, without major sponsors, and those sponsors will come from a wide family of types of sponsors, and one of them is going to be a food sponsor, and one of them will be a drink sponsor, and one of them will be a beer sponsor, and maybe none of those are particularly good when you're going to be training.
The England football team had a beer sponsor for a while.
Indeed.
So it's just a non-argument.
Well,
really,
for me, but Jez, and I've got to say, Jez, I have to say, I don't remember Bradley Wiggins sitting down very much when he was cycling. So I don't think he might have an issue with you in saying that it's a sitting down sport. The issue, though, is why are we good at those sports is because we have some fantastic coaches, Jürgen in rowing, Dave Brailsford in cycling. They're also quite technical sports where you can save a fraction of a second because you've got a great boat or you've got a great cycle and etc. So through the wealthier countries and through investment have done particularly well in those. When it comes to some of the more general sports where all you need is a pair of running spikes, then it's much more competitive. Instead of just in rowing, I don't know how many countries are seriously competitive in it, but it's probably about 30 or something. Come to athletics, 200 countries, they've all got a chance to compete. So it's much, much more difficult to win a gold medal in some of those sports. I'm not belittling rowing, I'm just saying that that's the reality.
Jez, do you follow those sports that you mentioned? Do you follow cycling or rowing? Is that something that's
No, not really. I think rowing is a lot of is a bit of an elite sport, if you ask me. I mean, I used to live in Henley and I lived in Oxford, and it's that sort of type. I don't think it's for quote unquote the common man like me. I'm very impressed with what happened with Bradley Wiggins. But it's just things like things like the football, things like the tennis, things like other sports. I just don't feel that there's enough input at the grassroots, and I think a lot of the associations governing these bodies are also very antiquated. But that's just my opinion. I might be wrong, and that's why I posed the question.
Jez, you mentioned tennis there specifically. This has been a bugbear of mine for quite a long time about the LTA, because when I was younger, I used to be a tennis coach, not to a very high level, but to a reasonable level. I did it in this country and I did it in America. And it was something that I found to be a problem within the system, that the right money, or significant money, was not getting to the right people, first and foremost. And by that I mean the young, talented players, the sort of 6, 7, 8 upwards. That's how young they start in a lot of other countries. And this is when you need to really be supporting these kids, getting them into an infrastructure and getting them into a system where they understand that as they progress, this is what they improve to. So they start at a certain level. If they progress, they move on to something else, and they can see it's not just an endless 10, 15 years of slogging away before they get somewhere. And that's where, particularly the LTA, where people get lost in that system. I've always been
fascinated by this. Why don't we produce, and we have produced one or two, why don't we produce a raft of tennis players? I know you've articulated some of it.
I mean, Andy Murray...
It's a product of Spain.
He's a product of Spain. He went to train in Barcelona for several of his formative years. And my theory on this has always been that if you look at countries like America, right through to sort of Croatia and Russia and perhaps the countries that you wouldn't expect to bring through a plethora of players, they tend to come through in a cluster, and I think that element of competition where they're always driving each other on every day through their growth spurts, through their formative years, through their training, they're driving them on, competition, matches, practice is always intense. I think that's something that we don't really have in this country. We're starting to get it now, and I think you look at Heather Watson and you look at Laura Robson, for example. Those are just two.
It's been a long time coming now.
Yeah, they are, but they're two
any young
similar
tennis
age.
players I know who are promising get shipped out to camps in Florida and Houston or
I
whatever.
mean, my wife was a professional tennis coach and was quite a decent player and a quarterfinalist junior at Wimbledon, captained the country at her age group. One of the big problems we've got in this country of some of the sports, the tennises and other sports, is the dominance of football. And, you can see it really in some of our national teams, Chelsea and Man United, etc. Those will have great young kids coming in very, very early on. They're going into the youth system at the age of 8, the age of 9, and they're being forced to give up other sports. To go in there, your coaches are telling you, no, you're not going to play tennis now, you're not going to play, you're not going to run.
But there's an infrastructure there. The
problem is
LTA
they
do not have an infrastructure to rival that.
Yes.
To say to the same child, well, look, okay, Chelsea may want you, or you may be put into this system, but actually, we can offer you something else if you want to play tennis that will give you the same support, the same funding, with the same clear path to where you ultimately want to be.
We've had this discussion, though, as I just made the point before, for years. And people like yourselves have made that point, and nothing ever seems to happen in that particular world.
Well,
and in your world, you won gold,
Yeah.
and the world changed. If Andy Murray won 3 or 4 Grand Slams, would it change?
I don't think it would, because the issue, bottom line, the issue is the standard of coaching in this country is not good enough, and it hasn't been for as long as you want to go back, really, 20 years.
I mean, it's frustrating, isn't it? Because football is a big business, and it sucks in all that. And I mean, Jez, I was told, it's not relevant to this discussion, but I was told that you're a Chelsea fan.
Yeah.
I mean, how much of your sporting aspiration or sporting desire goes into football as opposed to you being a sports fan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. 95% on Chelsea. The rest is just luxury. I'm looking forward to the games, but to be honest with you, I'll forget about them as soon as they're over. So it's a bit like that. But Chelsea, I'll remember for years. So you're right. That sums it up, really, I think.
Jez, also, in terms of bringing through young players, when was the last time Chelsea brought through a player?
That's the point.
Yes.
Well, Champions
Because
League final.
It is a big business.
He was in it.
Jez, thank you very much. Indeed,
Thank you.
that was a very interesting question. Yeah, it is. It's a. What'll happen again is you'll look at the Sun or the Mail or the Express or whatever, in 12 weeks' time, and they'll have, let's say, 8 pages of sport and 6.5 will be football. And I'm hoping that something emerges from the games that will be able to give us additional coverage for all the other sports that work so hard to give us that platform.
I think,
is that possible, Nick? Do you think it's going to...
Cynically, I don't think it will happen personally. I think there'll be a fall-off. Maybe the Standard's going to contribute as much to athletics now for the next 3 years, but I somewhat doubt it.
Okay.
Yeah, I doubt it too. If I'm honest.
Got to finish this section on a football note. It's half-time in Brazil versus Egypt, and no surprise, Brazil are winning, but they're winning 3-0. So maybe we're going to get them later in the tournament. We'll be back in about 3 minutes for a little bit more. Don't go away. And you're welcome back to the forum this Thursday evening. Lots happening at the football. We're keeping you informed. Please keep getting in contact with us. I know you are, but those that haven't yet, we're on Skype at STL-broadcast. You can tweet us on Twitter at Sports Tonight TV, and you can phone us on 0207 291 0868. So, chaps, the Olympics coming up. A few little bits and pieces have gone slightly wrong, not very much, but there will be issues. I know there's people wanting to talk about this. Do we have faith in the organisation behind London 2012?
I mean, look, there are always going to be teething problems. When you think of a competition of this magnitude, there's always going to be 1 or 2 little things that go wrong. Now, Of course, they're the Korean flag issue was obviously embarrassing. The fact I think Joe Allen was Welsh. Joe Allen was named as an Englishman in the Team GB football programme. That's obviously unfortunate. I'm sure he'll get over it in time. You know, basically, if we're sitting here in 2 weeks' time and this is the worst that we've had to deal with, then I think we're all right.
I can remember
Absolutely.
Seb Coe saying to me some time ago at the very beginning, in Australia, they had one train line serving the Stadium of Australia, and had it have gone down, the whole thing would have collapsed, and they had to pray every morning that it worked.
It did go down a week beforehand.
It
when
did.
They did their trial.
That's right. You've been driving around London at all, by the way?
I have been driving around London. Yeah, it's busy, but interesting.
Anywhere?
But interesting. I remember being at the Athens Olympics, and I spoke to a Greek taxi driver when I was out there, and he was taking me from one area to another. And he said, the British press. I said, what? He goes, they're so scathing at everything we do, and they literally pounce on anything bad. And when I got out there, it was absolutely fine. But there was all this stuff in the press saying it's not going to be ready. You've got these problems, these problems, these problems. But I think we're probably now being where we were hard on other countries. We're now hard on ourselves a little bit. And okay, we do make little mistakes, but. Do you know what? I think, you know, if we put on a great Olympic Games for us to, I don't think anyone's going to remember.
That is a great point, actually, because before Euro 2012, I remember a lot of stories about England's training camp wasn't going to be ready. They were having to train at a fourth division ground. There was going to be a lot of violence at matches.
Yep.
There was, people weren't going to be able to get there. The travel network was going to break down. And actually, yes, there were one or two problems, particularly early on in the tournament. But by and large, it ran without incident.
Yeah. And I think, I'm hoping this will be exactly the same, because I think the doomsayers are actually in the minority now. We have a gentleman called Alex Caring on Skype, on the phone line. I know we've got a little technical issue with you on the Skype line. Can you hear me all right, Alex?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, how are you?
Are you looking forward to the games? Are you excited?
Yeah, I can't wait, I'm really excited.
So are you like a fan of sport, or it's actually someone's told me that you're an Arsenal fan, which just happens to be what I happen to be as well. So let's just have, just before you ask your question, let me just ask you for 10 seconds, just give me your take on Van Persie for the rest of the season. Is he going to stay, or will he go, do you think?
I've given up caring now, I don't care. Talk to me about it. I mean, if he goes, we get the money for him. If he stays, we've got a great player, but he obviously doesn't want to play for the club. That's as far as
Fair enough. I would agree with you. Okay, I'm going to have one last question to you before we move on. Where's Arsenal going to finish this year?
The same place they finish every year, top four,
Top
Champions League plays, no cups.
Okay. Well, it seems to be a commonly shared view. Alex, any thoughts about the Olympics? Do you want to ask these guys anything?
Basically, I was just wondering, there's been 3 big mistakes already with the Korean flag and the Great Britain women's team being announced as the England team, and today Joe Allen has been put in the England programme as English rather than as Great British. Do you think it's all going well and they've prepared well enough, or do you think these are big mistakes?
Well, we kind of touched on this a few minutes ago. I have to say, because you represent the media here tonight, is this a media issue that actually is a non-issue?
Well, I mean, I'll just caveat my answer before I start by saying I don't think the Evening Standard necessarily tends to associate with itself, or certainly go too hard on this kind of thing. Yes, of course they report it, and yes, maybe they go over the mark every now and again, but I don't think it's a tabloid paper necessarily. But I think I mean, you've got to remember that newspapers have got a lot of pages to fill about the Olympics, and there isn't a lot going on at the moment, and I think that has a lot to do with it. I think once the sport starts, I know it's already started, but en masse, I think these kind of issues will sort of fall by the wayside a bit more. I mean, Alex said the England programme. I mean, it's the Team GB programme. He made the same mistake himself. These are just semantics that everybody's getting their head around, because in terms of the football side of it, we've never seen a Team GB side. This is something that we're all sort of used to trying to talk about England or Wales or Northern Ireland or Scotland, and yet now we're talking about Team GB. And obviously, this is something that everyone's going to get used to, and as the games go on, I think they will.
What do you think about Team GB. Are you excited about that, Nick? Does that I don't know, you're a sports fan.
I'm a sports fan. I will watch it and I'll be enthused by it.
I mean, you're a West Ham fan as well. Does it mean
true.
more to you if West Ham win the Premier League next year, or if Team GB?
Well, we can all have
going with
fantasies, can't we? It'll be more to me if West Ham stay up than if Team GB wins, I'm afraid, because I'm not a GB fan, I'm an England fan, and that's just the nature of it, I'm afraid. These are minor glitches. I know that we're trying to maybe blame the English press, but there was a very good article written just before the Sydney Games, and they were saying the same thing. They were saying that every game
it's not
has
just
these...
us. I mean, I've scanned all of the
that
papers over the last few days. I'm not someone who knocks the media. I think the media have helped our sports over the years considerably, so I lay that down as a marker. I'm getting a little tired of the Daily Mail finding negatives, for instance, I'm using them as an example, continually. I mean, is this...
Well, we're in that phase. I mean, we're in the so-called phase of the hunt for the guilty, and the last phase on any Olympic is the glorification of the uninvolved, and we aren't quite there yet. We will have that. There will be glitches. These will be trivia questions in 3 years' time, and no one will remember them. I'm afraid to say we're just in that false dawn at the moment before the sport starts. As soon as the medals really start hitting home.
Do you get frustrated about the media?
A little bit, because I think we've got this... Team GB is made up of all these amateur sports. Yeah, we're amateurs at the end of the day. Rowing's an amateur sport. It might be very professionally well done, but it's an amateur sport, and I think we should be very proud of all these people that have given over their life. And
that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you guys, like all other top sportsmen, give over your lives.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a complete life reversal. That's what you're focused on.
When I first started out, it was 2 training sessions, 6 days a week. And then, I tell you what, OK, fantastic. I was able to drop my bar job and go on to £8,000 of grant money.
How long were your
fantastic.
sessions?
And then, but the training went up, so it went to 3 sessions and then 4 sessions.
How long are your sessions, roughly?
You start. It's a full-day job. It starts 6:37 in the morning. Do your first session. You have your second breakfast at like 10 o'clock. And then you go again, another session up until lunchtime, have a little break for 2 hours, then you go again and again. It's intense.
Putting this in context, Toby, you have to make a decision about, do you want to earn money or do you want a life as a sportsman? And it's kind of like...
Actually, what happens is...
There's no dichotomy.
You don't even... If you are a dedicated sportsman, you don't even think of the money, because you're in a situation where you go, that's what I want to do, and you do it regardless whether there was anyone watching or not. So basically, 30,000 people fill the Olympic lake in spectators. You will be prepared to do it whether there be no one there or everyone there.
So it's everything to you.
Absolutely, yeah. It's absolutely. You want to be as best as you can be, and that's it. I want to be better than I am at the moment.
That's great to hear. And for somebody like Alex, you're a sports fan. I mean,
Yeah.
that must be inspirational stuff to hear something like that, isn't it? That what these guys are putting up for.
I don't really even think you need to justify yourself if you've been chosen to represent your country in the Olympics. I mean, I'm from a younger generation where I feel like everyone should admire that. That's a massive thing. Like, even if you are an amateur, that's a massive thing to represent your country in the Olympics. That's the highest level, the greatest achievement. You shouldn't even be discussing about like what time you have to get up and things like that. The fact of the matter is, I don't think anyone at home will dispute your training regime and how hard it's been, because it's such a massive thing, and the admiration I have for all the athletics and the athletes at the Olympics, from the what people would see as the lesser sports to track and field events. I think it's a massive deal and a really admirable thing.
Okay, so let me ask you this: Gareth Bale, apparently injured but not injured, playing for Tottenham instead of Team GB. Does that? I know you're an Arsenal fan. He plays for Spurs, but put that aside for a minute. What does that make you feel towards him as an individual sportsman?
I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's Mr. The club pays his wages and they pay him a lot. I mean, I don't want to get involved in the politics of football because honestly, I'm completely mesmerised by the whole situation. But, I mean, it seems a very double standard for a British team, an English team, Tottenham, to not let a British player compete. The fact that the player probably doesn't get much say in the situation is probably down to do with club. It's very disappointing for Stuart Pearce for us watching, because it just seems like the great British football team is just the players that no one mind. The club.
Okay, Alex, let me.
Mind.
Thanks for that. Let me put that to you, James.
Yeah.
Team GB, you write a lot about football. Is it exciting to you? Is it something that you would be turned on to present to your readers in a way that it's a really important thing? Team GB football, I mean.
I think it's yes is the short answer. For me personally, I think it's a fantastically unique thing to report on. As I say, Team GB has never existed in this kind of guise in terms of, was it 40, 45 years? You know, for a very long time. So for me to get the chance to write about that, I think it's fantastic, and you know, the enthusiasm that I'll try to put across in the articles hopefully will come across in some form or another. But I think there is an issue here. I mean, firstly, the thing to say about Gareth Bale is that when you speak to people in and around Tottenham, they insist that this is a genuine issue. They have issued quite a strongly worded statement this afternoon refuting any suggestion of foul play, saying that, look, you know, we've had this all the way along with the BOA. They knew his situation. We submitted the medical reports to him and to Stuart Pearce's people. They agreed that he wasn't fit to play. And there is a difference between playing for your country in an Olympic Games and playing 74 minutes in a friendly on a kind of jolly overseas, you know, as a warm-up. There is a difference. That is to be said.
You don't think he was, if my country, Wales, doesn't care particularly, then why should I?
I think that if you go back and listen to the statements that he gave repeatedly when he was asked about this, he wanted to play. He made it quite clear he wanted to play. And, you know, how old is he? 21, 22, you know, okay, he is part of what could be a very good Wales side coming forward, but he probably looks at somebody like Ryan Giggs and says, well, I may never get another chance to play for my country at a massive tournament like this. You know, I think Ryan Giggs is a perfect choice as captain, just on a side point, because he is the embodiment of whatever the version of the Olympic spirit is for footballers, because it's very different. You know, we talk about the training, the dedication that Toby has. Not to say that professional footballers don't have that dedication, but to say that the Olympic Games is a pinnacle for any of those players would be wrong. It just isn't. It just isn't, and that is the problem.
Do the politics play badly here? I mean, you look at England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales, then it didn't exactly come together on this, did they?
Well, they didn't, and that was certainly unfortunate. But I think the wider question is the one that James is making, is to, you know, whether some sports really do see the Olympics as the pinnacle of their year or their cycles. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Rowing, it's all and everything.
And is it
but for tennis and for football?
Is that a monetary factor? That's what's frustrating about it, because especially when I'm, you know, talking or trying to inspire the younger generation, and they're asking how much money's in that. And that's, to me, that's not the attitude that I started off 20 years ago when I started in my sport.
And also, I mean, footballers, you know, professional footballers are not trained to peak in July and August.
Yeah.
They train themselves, they condition themselves to, you know, to last the rigours of a very difficult and long Premier League season. But what I'd like to know from you is that if you think there is a resentment between the people who train like you have done for 4 years on a cycle to peak at the Olympic Games, it's the be-all and end-all. They don't have the money, they don't have the backing, they don't have the celebrity aspect of it. You see those people put alongside footballers and other, you know, you could throw Andy Murray into this possibly as well, you know, professional sportsmen who kind of see the Olympic Games as, oh, this is a bonus, and oh, it's great, it's in London, maybe I'll get involved in that. Do you think there's any kind of friction there within Team GB for the different approaches to the Olympics?
It's probably why, it might be even with myself, that maybe I don't take to football as other people do, because I guess I've worked with some sort of junior international golfers, footballers and some tennis players, and in terms of rowing, I just feel that we're really professional in terms of, like, whether it's psychology, things in what we eat, and the whole thing has just transformed over the last 20 years since I've been involved in the sport. And I think it's crazy when you hear a footballer not quite making a fitness test because they're not fit enough. I mean, in rowing, it's like a no-brainer. You know, you got to go to the start line, and you've got that one chance. You've got 4 years. You know, you've been training. You've got 210 strokes, less than 6 minutes to express yourself over the last 4 years of training. you know, you're not going to turn up and not be fit. It's going to be one of all the boxes that you've ticked to make sure. So I think there probably is a little bit of kind of, you know, all these people get paid vast amounts of money, and there we are on a grant that sort of sits down here. That, you know, and you think back, you know, Matthew Pinsent and Steve Redgrave came back from the Olympic Games, 3 Olympic gold medals, and they couldn't get sponsorship. I mean, it's like, it's crazy.
It is an astonishing situation, isn't it? I must just go back quickly to our Skyper, Alex. Is money the determining factor in sport these days, or is it determination still?
Money, definitely money.
Definitely money.
Money.
Okay, Alex, thank you for your question. I just want to, James, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just
me first, and I want to ask you that same question.
To go back to what you were going to say, but when you asked me about the football and does it inspire me, you know, in a way, I don't think that the football should take centre stage. Well, I don't think it should take centre stage at the Olympics. I think
I don't think it will.
I don't think it does. I don't think
the
interest in it, when you look at the ticket sales, particularly, that's probably the biggest giveaway. The football tickets were pretty much the highest ones that shipped, weren't they?
Yes, actually, I was going to ask you this, Breaker. You just reminded me something that was in my mind. Why would you choose Hampden Park for a minority football game, for instance? Should we just have gone for smaller venues? Sorry, that was just an adjunct.
Very much so, and the Premier League in particular and a number of others did recommend that's exactly what they should do. And also, maybe by doing that, to go some smaller grounds, you could have taken the Olympic spirit to some of the other smaller towns in Great Britain. You know, you go to a town like Brighton, which is a lovely, lovely stadium, the new stadium there. We would have filled it out, and you would have been taking the Olympics to a place of Britain where it was not going to and couldn't go to.
Yeah, you obviously share that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, as I say, it's...
So I cut across you. What were you...
Well, it's just, you know, on the one hand, obviously, one of my major remits during the games is going to be to write about the football, because that's what I do most of the year. But in a way, I don't want it to be... I don't think it should be the main... I think it should be these guys who train, and it is the pinnacle for them. And I think the Olympic spirit for so many people is about coming to these stadiums, coming to these venues, and showing their appreciation for these guys who put their bodies on the line, show this unbelievable dedication, you know, through the cold, through the winter, without the money.
Across even BMX biking and things like that?
Yeah, the traditional Olympic sports, the sports that don't get the limelight, that something like football has 24/7. This is the time for more traditional Olympic sports to shine and to be given the recognition they deserve. Because if they're not, we talked earlier about whether football dominates sports. Well, that's only going to happen even more if these sports don't get their time, when it is the pinnacle of what they all come to do.
Final question on this section, Nick. The fact that it's in London, is that going to be an even bigger message out to people? I know that wherever the Olympics are, it's a big city, it's a big moment, and it's a unique occasion. The fact that it's London, and London's one of the calling centres of the world, is this going to really push the various sports out to people and begin to get a global sentiment of positivity towards them?
I think if you look at one of the things that Seb said in 2005 when he stood up in Singapore and we were bidding for it, part of it was the international inspiration route, and that's what you're referring to there. One of the things we did, I was on the board of UK Sport, we took this international inspiration programme and we said, how can we do that? Because I'm afraid actually showing it on television, that's on its own isn't going to do it. But it's some of the work that we've been doing in countries around the world, Malawi and many others, small projects, but really important.
I want to talk a bit about this, because I think a lot of people forget what goes on behind these major events and what they actually throw off as part of their own legacy. We've got to go to a quick break. We're going to come back, talk about the Olympics and a lot more. Please go and have a cup of tea and hurry up back. See you soon. Greetings and welcome back to the forum. I have to report that England have just kicked off the second half. I'm sorry, I said that now, didn't I? So that's...
It's semantics.
It's semantics. I'll start that again from this camera. Hello. Team GB have just started the second half and they're winning 1-0. Not England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales, Team GB. But I do have a tweet here that says, it's a tweet at the T-Bones 67, at the T-Bone 67. Why is it called Team GB and not Team Great Britain? They don't say Team... why is it called Team GB and not just Great Britain? They don't say Team Brazil or Team Senegal or Team Uruguay. Nick, could you throw some
They actually do say some of those countries. I'm not too sure about Senegal, but there is Team USA. It's a marketing device which is adopted by the British Olympic Association. It looks much easier on the eye when you put it on merchandise, and it's easier to say and to chant. It's that simple, really.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that point. James, have we over-marketed these games? Is it going to drown in its own commercialism?
I don't know whether can you overmarket an Olympic Games in London? I don't know whether that's even really possible. I mean, I think it's, I think you have to do everything you can to maximise the opportunity of having such a fantastic sporting event in your own country, and everybody's going to have an agenda to do that.
So all the little things, the inconveniences of the roads and the stuff and the stuff and the stuff, it's just, we really should just smile through it, shouldn't we? And just say, well, that's it, it's the Olympics, we're going to get on with it.
Well, look, the transport will there's probably going to be some problems with the transport. I think we all pretty much predict that, whatever extent, wherever it may be. But there's always problems with London transport. And so you always have to put up with it, you always have to deal with it. Well, now you've got an Olympic Games to help you get through it. That's how people should look at it.
One more, yeah, that's a good point. One more question. Do you think Londoners, in particular, having paid for quite a lot of this, should have had special treatment in terms of ticketing and price breaks and things like that?
That's a difficult one. I mean, as somebody who's lived in London for actually 2005, pretty much when we got the game. So yeah, I guess I've contributed as much as most. I don't know. There is certainly a case for that, but I think it's important. Certainly, I talked to my parents who live in Suffolk. They're out of London. And I've got family up in sort of Leicester and further north as well. And I talk to them, and they're part of them. Some of them talk to me saying, well, they don't really feel part of it, and I think that's a real shame. I think it should be inclusive. I think that, when you talk about
Torch relays help, doesn't it?
Yeah, massively. But you talk of London waiting for pay and everything else, that kind of evens itself out, I think, to a degree. And I think it is important that the whole of the country embraces it, and the whole of the country is able to embrace it, and obviously tickets being the primary source for that.
We have a gentleman called Nick Shepherd on the Skype line. Nick, just before you ask your question, do you feel that this has been an inclusive Games, the point that James has made?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you very well, the question there. You were breaking up. Try it again.
Do you think that the London 2012 Games have become or have been inclusive to Great Britain as its presentation?
I think the attempt has been there to make it inclusive. I'm not convinced that that it's been embraced throughout the country. I hear lots of people complaining about, it means nothing to us in Wolverhampton or in Sheffield or whatever. That's despite the torch relay. I think it's a shame. It is the London Games, but I think it can be accepted as a British Games. We do see events taking place in different parts of the country, and I think it's a pity that there is a small number of moaners who had a lot of attention given to them, who perhaps have, perhaps they've had too much of the limelight in terms of complaining. I think overall the majority of people are embracing the Games, and I'm looking forward to them. Nick,
I think you're absolutely correct. My own personal opinion, of course. You have a question for the panel?
Yeah, my question, a bit different from what's been discussed so far. There's a Greek athlete, I think she's a triple jumper, with a probably rather difficult to pronounce name, Papakristou, I think, who's been expelled from her team by her own Greek team for comments that she posted on Twitter that were deemed to be racist. And it's not the first time this has happened with sport, not at the Olympics, but at other sports where sports people have made comments that haven't been so clever, perhaps. I was wondering whether the panel feel that sports people, certainly the Olympic participants, shouldn't be allowed. Should they be banned from using Twitter for the duration of the Olympics? And that, of course, the question might then go on to football and other sports later.
Thank you, Nick. Well, Toby, you're a sportsman.
Yeah, I mean, okay, when I got into sport, there was no media training at all. And I guess in the sport I was in, we weren't really featured in the media, so you didn't need to worry about it. But obviously, things have changed.
Days if you had a cracknell in a
of course, yeah,
media
and
like we have got today.
Ideally, an athlete should go through some type of media training to be aware. And I think, you know, people commented the other day when Bradley Wiggins did a little funny comment on top of the podium the other day, and someone commented that he hadn't had any media training. But to be fair, I quite liked it, and I thought it was, you know, quite nice.
Very natural, actually.
Yeah, it was quite natural, and it was fine. But there's that fine line, isn't there, between that and then doing something that we've seen on this tweet. So I think it's up to the athlete's judgment, and it's a real shame that she's been taken out, but I can understand why that has happened. And I think all athletes coming to the Olympic Games.
Discipline? I mean, I'm not condoning racism for 1 second, but is that it's a very strong sanction, isn't it? She's worked for this for her life.
I think it is. I would have liked to have thought that she would have been told and had some guidelines, and as an athlete we get given guidelines of how we're meant to conduct ourselves as a person within our sport, and how it plays on our sport depending on how, you know, what we do, and we have to sign a contract. So we understand that. So if we were to do something like that, I think I can understand why she would get chucked out. I don't know what her situation was, if she was just a bad day and then she just put it. But I guess we're in that media where if you have a bad day, you are at your fingertips, and you've got to be so careful what you say and what you do.
I mean, Nick, you're a major sports administrator. You have to deal with situations like this. It is harsh, and as Toby said, you know, he completely empathises with the situation. But is it just daft? I mean, you don't expect to write racist comments on a wall, and these are out there publicly.
If you have a racist mentality, you'll do something stupid, whether or not it's on Twitter, a website, in your statements to the press or wherever else. I don't think we can blame Twitter for that. I actually
that's just a vessel, isn't it?
I really value sometimes the comments I read on Twitter feeds, giving me immediate insight into the way an athlete or a sports person thinks. The difficulty here is that you're saying, and you're absolutely right, and most athletes don't think before they tweet. Now, they don't think before they say, and you know, they'll see a journalist like James, and sometimes maybe that will put them on guard, not because it's James, but because it's a journalist. I've got to be careful of what I say. They're not thinking like that when they're blogging or when they're putting it on their tweet.
If an athlete was in the London Marathon and something similar happened, what action would you be taking?
I'd probably shut them out, to tell you the truth.
If you do the same thing.
This is one of the great things about the Olympic Games has always been its nature of saying that it's a spirit of togetherness. It's why the Olympics first started, you know, the Olympic truce and all of that going back to history. She's got the ability to appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. I understand that that's something that she may be doing.
Will that sit fast enough?
That will sit tomorrow.
Okay.
I mean, all of the arbitrators from the Court of Arbitration for Sport are in London at the moment. The ad hoc committee, they will make a decision immediately. We've just seen that with a South African show jumper who was excluded, and he's in fact won his appeal yesterday.
Okay.
So it can move very, very quickly.
Can I say that also, if we talk about the Olympic values, one of those is friendship, and you know, racism, friendship. You know, it does. And we've talked a lot about sport this evening, but you know, the Olympics is a bigger picture amongst other things.
It's a spirit,
and it's a spirit, and the word friendship, and you know, that obviously those two things don't mix, so you just can't.
Nick, it was a very relevant question. You heard especially what Toby just said just now about the spirit of the games. What's your opinion?
Well, my personal opinion is that sports people should be allowed to tweet if they want to, but they should be given very, very strict guidelines and and warnings as to the impact it can have. It's very, very easy if you're, as somebody said on the panel just now, if you had a bad day, if you're in a bad mood, it's very easy to press a few buttons. It's only a few characters. It's so quick and easy to do, and it's very, very easy to say something wrong. And because of the shortness of the sentence, it is extremely easy for things to be taken out of context, or for a small statement to be blown up out of all proportion. I wouldn't want to see it banned, but I do think that sports people, Olympics and after the Olympics, do need a lot of guidance and to be told what the what the risks are and what the punishment would be for those who transgress it. But I think it would be a shame for it to be banned. It does give you an insight into the minds of sports people, shows they're human, But I think they do need to be careful. I don't think it's a question of media training. It's just a matter of being sensible.
Sense and sense.
Otherwise, it's a question, I think, of tweet in haste and repent at your leisure.
Sense and sensibility. Very articulately put, Nick. Final word from you, James. It must make your life considerably easier, doesn't it?
Well,
as a journalist, you used to have to go and do research. Now you just switch on Twitter and you can put your stories together.
There tend to be a few stories coming out of Twitter. Yeah, I mean it's an issue that certainly is not confined to the athletics world. I mean, the Premier League this week have issued new guidelines sent to all clubs to try and help them tackle the issue of social media and give them guidelines as to...
Is that message getting through, James?
Well, I think the issue that it has become a problem that needs addressing has certainly got through to the Premier League, because clubs have been, and I know this speaking to a couple of managers have gone to the Premier League and said, look, we don't really know how to handle this. As the organisation responsible for the Premier League, what do we need to do to make sure that we don't get players who divulge team information or contract situations or whatever?
But it is
may
across
be.
the board. It's not just football's problem, is
No,
it?
no, absolutely not. I'm just saying
everywhere.
that football, with its infrastructure, and with everything else we've talked about, the professional side of the game, and everything that comes with it, is still really grappling and struggling to come to terms with
Coming
this.
to terms with modern technology, which is
Yeah.
only going to get harder for us all.
I really enjoyed Barton's tweets at the beginning of the season. They were fantastic.
But QPR
I'm
are
gonna
a
have
great
to-
example of it, yeah.
We will revisit this many times. It's come up quite a few times during the series. We have to go to a commercial break. Please come and join us again in a few minutes' time. We're going to pick this up again and talk about a lot more issues around the Olympics. See you in a few minutes. Hello and welcome back to the forum. Another half an hour or so to go of hopefully stimulating discussion with Toby Garbett, James Ollie, Nick Bittell, and you. Now, we talked a little bit about Twitter just now, and that's opened up a whole new dimension for me, because it takes something that's off the field back on the field again. And I just have a little bit of... I know I'd like you to finish what you were saying about Twitter, but I'd also like to ask you another question, which is, we've seen things happening on the field which have then involved the police and then involved legal cases. Now, I absolutely am not a racist and would deplore that in anybody, but I do find it a little disturbing that somebody can watch a sport, and you know, Toby, what it's like, how much vibrance and emotional energy goes into any sport, and say something, and in the heat of the moment, somebody phones up and complains, and suddenly the police are involved, and it's a whole big court case. So revisit briefly what you were saying with Twitter, and then could you just give me your thoughts as a reporter on what's happened on and off the field recently?
Well, I think that there's no doubt that Twitter has completely moved the goalposts, pardon the pun, for football and for all sports, in terms of, I think particularly now more than ever, you see sportsmen having layers between, and I'm talking about the big sports here, really, that have increasing layers of bureaucracy between themselves and the fans. And what Twitter does is just cut right through that in a heartbeat. And when we talk about emotions getting the better of people and people having Twitter at their fingertips to just tweet whatever they like, they don't sometimes think it through. Maybe a stereotype, but it's probably true. Footballers aren't the brightest bunch by and large. And when you throw in the emotion of the occasion, and particularly if there's been a big game or a big incident, sometimes they can overreact or just don't have that filter where they have a press officer next to them or a member of their family or whoever it may be to just say, look, do you know what, Joey, sleep on this.
Use that name just by accident.
Just a random name. Do you know what?
Tongue.
Just sleep on this and just have a think maybe tomorrow if you want to maybe put... Because, of course, if you put a statement out, it's a whole different issue. There's more people involved, it takes longer, whereas in Twitter you can knock out 3 or 4 tweets.
Very quickly, just before we go to Scott on the phones, police getting involved in sport, game?
The Anton Ferdinand John Terry case is the example of this, really, that, you know, I was at that game, and the managers had come in and gone, and nobody had asked anyone about it. Nobody even knew about it, and it was only on Twitter when and with YouTube and these other kind of social media and this fast internet access that people have that they can look at, and Sky play a part in this to a degree that they obviously have cameras all over the place and all these different angles that people can watch these games from. You know, and it was only when it started happening on Twitter that people were saying, well, hang on, has John Terry said this? Did anyone know about this? Who's asked anyone about this? That it exploded, and from there, because it kind of grew almost independent of the game itself, it became this huge issue, and obviously with the racial element.
What's your view, though, James, that you know, suddenly something that's happened in the heat of the moment, forget it was that incident for a moment, it could be anything, and suddenly the police are involved and there's a court case, and it's a long subject, this. I'm trying to condense you down because I've got someone holding on the phone for you. It's your mum. It's, does that not make you feel a bit uncomfortable, like it makes me feel uncomfortable? Nick's shaking his head.
It does, but I think if you accept £3.2 billion from Sky...
Okay, that's a very valid
and Sky
point,
can therefore show whatever they want as much as they want.
Thank you, that answers the question.
I'm sorry, if you're on a football field or whether you're ringside and you commit a criminal offence, then the police should be able to get involved. You remember when Duncan Ferguson went to prison for assault on the field? There's no answer to say it was in the heat of the match. It was just something
that was in there. It's been in my head a long time. You both have answered that question. Scott, hello, are you there?
Hi, yeah.
Hello, Scott. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Three intelligent guys waiting to hear what you'd like to ask them.
Yeah, I was just, from my point of view, I work for the Pompey Supporters Trust, and we're obviously trying to save Portsmouth Football Club at the moment and turn it into a community club. I just wanted to see if the guys had a view on whether completely fan-owned and run community clubs have an opportunity to succeed in the current financial way that football's run.
Well, I'm picking on you a little bit at the moment, but I think this sits very much in your domain. You and I have had football conversations over the years, and I know we've even touched on Portsmouth. Scott, I'm going to ask James, is this, first of all, is there anything you know about Portsmouth that can shed any light on what the current state of play is as we sit here tonight? And what did you think of what Scott asked you?
Well, all I can say really is that it remains, as I'm sure Scott already knows, an extremely perilous situation. And I think we've heard a number of times before Portsmouth are close to going to the wall, and maybe not thought it's actually the case. This time it really is. They are really in the last chance saloon here. I think in terms of whether a fan, sort of supporter-owned club can succeed, I think it can. I mean, Barcelona have a very strong supporter influence. They're the ultimate kind of model, if you like, for this. Arsenal are a football club that are trying to increase this. They have a fan share scheme that currently they only own about, I think, 3 or 4% of the club, but they're trying to expand that and trying to get greater fan involvement. I think I'm for that as a principle, as a sort of a club run as a democracy, if you like, by the people that love it most, rather than perhaps the big decisions taken by owners who maybe are not in it for the right reasons. I think that was clearly the case at Rangers. And maybe
although David Murray did put in sizable amounts of his own.
He certainly did. He certainly did. That's true. But I do feel that the underlying problem here is that the fit and proper persons test for owners in the Premier League is not strong enough.
Okay. Let me come to Nick on this, because I know, as I said at the top part of the programme, you are a man of many guises, as well as being Chief Executive of London Marathon. You are also a very eminent sports lawyer, and I know you and I have in the past had conversations about what could happen to the Portsmouth franchise. Right. Before we get on to that as an issue, what's your thoughts about the current Portsmouth situation, how it's got there?
Oh, it is an object lesson in the abject failure of sports administration. It's not just a question of the fit and proper test, because although I think that would have been might have rooted out the problem in Glasgow Rangers with Craig White, but it's about the financial doping here, about how a owner can take over a football club without putting any money into that club at all, borrow against future earnings, be it the season ticket sales or whatever, and you hock a club up to the eyeballs, and it's not surprising that it's then got the chance of failing. I used to own a football club many years ago, as you know. I was part owner of Wigan Athletic, sold the club to David Whelan. You cannot run any business if you're leveraged to that extent. Ultimately, you're going to fail. And the model of quite a few people of over-leveraging football clubs with the hope there's going to be a payday at the end when you sell out for some massive capital sum, that's not a valid model. And that's what's happened. So it's a failure of football to grasp the nettles of fit and proper test and the issues of financial doping.
It's very interesting. Scott, there's nobody in this studio, certainly, that doesn't feel immense empathy for your situation. What do you think is going to happen? Do you have any semblance of a plan should this club finally go into liquidation?
Well, I think coming back to that last point that was made about the financial doping, I think that's why I raised the question, is the fact that we would not want to financially dope the club. In fact, we would try and run it as break even and profitable in order to try and turn the club around. And it seems as if that doesn't allow you on a level playing field, because every club is chasing the dream. Every club is borrowing money that it can't afford to a certain degree. And if you come in with an ethos that means that you're going to try and run a club on the money that you take through the gates and sell merchandise and all the rest of it, people keep saying, well, you won't be able to compete. So that's why I asked the question. It's interesting to find out if there's either guys have got an answer. But from our point of view, it's a very, very dire situation. It seems to change daily, and it seems as if it's now got to the unedifying point where people are starting to point fingers and have arguments in the press, and it doesn't help from the trust point of view, it doesn't help us at all, because we're trying to keep dignified and keep quiet, and you've got administrators and players throwing abuse back at each other.
Scott, I'm going to ask that. I'm going to put that at Nick.
The last club that really was a community club and succeeded was Nottingham Forest, and then when Irving Scholar bought it, that was the last of those sorts of clubs. I think it's very difficult to see how a club at beyond really the second division level could succeed. The trouble is there are too many clubs living beyond their means in the upper levels and echelons of British football, be it in Scotland or in England. And that means that a community club that has to survive on the money that it takes through television income and money through the gate, etc., I think those days probably, very sadly, are behind us.
But the issue with this was, at least in part, attempted to be addressed by UEFA's financial fair play, which at the higher end of the Premier League in particular was supposed to kind of rein in the likes of Chelsea and Manchester City, raising the bar to this new level of expenditure, and yet here we are with Chelsea having spent 70-odd million already. It doesn't look like it's going to work, and obviously, again,
there's rumour last week that the fair play might be extended to the Premier League by the Premier League. Is that blowing in the wind?
I don't think they see that as a viable option, simply because it would restrict the ability of their clubs to compete by comparison with the European counterparts.
Let me ask Scott something. Scott, if and Nick and I had lunch on this a few weeks ago. We were just kicking around some ideas and thoughts. If the Rangers situation had evolved differently, how would you have felt if they had come down and taken your franchise, saved your club, and been able to have played under the Rangers banner in the English Football League?
You're going back to the Wimbledon franchise movie.
Exactly.
You called, of course, for the franchise earlier. I choked back a gasp.
Sorry, did I? Okay.
Rather than shouting out at the time, but let's avoid calling football clubs franchises, because you go down the road of MK Dons and all the rest of it, and that was a really horrible period in English football. And I'm glad that Wimbledon have got a team back. So yeah, personally, and I think every football fan who follows their local team would be horrified by either being moved or being taken over by another name. So no, I wouldn't agree with that at all, and I can't see the English authorities going for that either.
Yeah, unfortunately, franchise seems to be an operative word in the thinking of people around clubs that are facing potential financial disaster. Look, what do you think's the backstop here? What do you think's going to happen, Scott?
What comes in the next week or so? I mean, we're furiously working behind the scenes, it's not as if we haven't already put in 3 or 4 months of 18-hour days. We've got another couple of weeks of 18-hour days with a big team. They deserve statues, every single one of them, for the work that they've put in over the last 3 to 4 or 5 months. We just need to get everybody sat in a room and to start talking sensibly. It doesn't seem as if, since Trevor Birch announced the D-Day the other day, that it's gone anything other into unhelpful bickering between certain players and administration. We just need to get everybody in a room and say, look, this is what the offer is, this is what you can take. If you don't take it, you will get nothing from liquidation, and a city loses its football club and you will be vilified. So we'll just have to see. We'll carry on the work and we'll just see where it takes us.
Okay, we wish you the very best, Scott, and that's a very heartfelt wish, I think, from probably just about every football supporter and certainly from everyone sitting here. Final word, James. I'd like to talk to you about football, but I know... see the thing is, in your sport, you don't have these issues. I mean, the boats sink.
Well, it's interesting because you had like Jez the caller earlier who was talking about rowing elite level sport, but you've got elite level sport that he was calling it, but then they don't get any funding. And he's sort of saying he's more of a football person, but then it's almost, it turns the sport almost a really bit ugly, I think, talking about
well,
the
sport becomes a business, and there's a thin dividing line, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's really interesting to talk about the elite level bit, saying, oh, it's elitist, but there's no money in it for the players. But then you've got football that's got loads of money for the players. It's really interesting.
It's a real dichotomy. Final word: are they going to survive, Portsmouth? In your opinion?
I think they will. I think they will, and I think it's important that the lessons are learned from this. And I think that you need to look at other countries, perhaps maybe like the Bundesliga, who have rules in place where they say to owners, "We want you in for the long term. If you do not." I think, is it 10 years? I think it's 10 or maybe 15 years. They have to agree to a 10-year investment in a club, before they can make massive changes to it. So they have to commit to a long-term strategy. And I think it's those kind of regulations that need to be brought in, much stricter regulations of new people coming into football clubs to ensure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again.
Okay, we're going to leave it at that point. It's a fascinating subject, this, because I'm mildly fearful as well about some of the Football League clubs in the Championship chasing the Premier League major bucks, which are going to be heading their way in a year or so's time, that may or may not be getting there and end up in a position where they've chased it, spent a lot of money in it, and missed out and are financially bereft because of it. So I think this conversation is going to go on for quite a while. I'm going to stop talking now. We're going to take a little break. We'll be back in a few minutes on Sports Tonight Live. Welcome back to the Forum. Team GB still winning 1-0, not very long to go, fingers crossed. I'm with Toby Garbett, Nick Patel, James Olley. We were talking about the financial or bad financial management in football clubs. We look across the spectrum of British sport. Are we, and I guess I have to come to you, Nick, first, because you're involved in administration of chunks of British sport. Are we well run financially as a sporting, inverted commas, industry?
Generally, yes. I mean, the sporting sector is one of the most vibrant sectors in this country. It's growing. The number of people we're employing is going. It counts for something like, depending on your point of view, somewhere between 3 and 4% of GDP. And generally, things like Wimbledon, the European Tour, which are based in Britain, these are very well-run sporting organisations. Our difficulty is actually at the lower level, where some community clubs have struggled over the years because of lack of funding on a historical basis to get themselves run properly.
Lottery's helped a lot.
Lottery has helped, and Lottery is continuing to help with that.
Good.
But we still have to change.
Stephen, hello. Stephen Hopwood, is that you? I came to you because we were sitting listening to Nick, and I saw you there, and I thought, it's your turn now. Stephen, you've got something which is very close to my heart, actually, so I'd like you to just ask your question to the panel.
Right, okay. Hi, lads, are you all right?
Yeah, we're all well, thank you.
All good.
Yeah, right. With teams and athletes using more sports science techniques to stay fit and recover from injuries quicker, where's the line drawn between cheating and having a fair advantage?
Just before you answered that, Toby, this is very much your domain. I understand that Senegal have just equalised, so we're now Team GB 1, Senegal 1. Toby, there's a thin dividing line here, isn't there, to this question?
Well, you know, I started off earlier in the show when I talked about my donut eating because I had no education in terms of my nutritional background. And ironically now, one of the things I work as is a coach and personal trainer, so I teach that to other people. And I remember Steve Redgrave used to talk about where rowers are on a seafood diet, which means you basically see food and you eat it. So you take anything. So
I'm actually a little bit more concerned, though, to take what Stephen's saying. The thin line I was asking you about was really about herbs, things that help you, that are not particularly banned at the moment, but maybe very near that line.
Well, it's interesting because, nutritionists, psychologists, those are all things that have come into, and they've made a massive difference, and they weren't around when I first started in sport. And then, you know, you can take it one step further, and then drugs in sport. And, you know, I go in to do talks, and one of the questions that I talk to kids about is get them to put their hands up and, you know, do you feel that when Dwayne Chambers got banned, do you feel it should have been a life ban? Do you think it should have been a couple of years? You know, and it's interesting, it's split 50-50 all the time. Some people think you should have a second chance. Some people think it should be absolutely game over. And, you know, WADA, the Doping Federation, you know, were very stringent and are very stringent with their testing. You know, I got tested about 12, 13 times while I was an athlete on the sport, in competition and out of competition. Towards the end of my career, there's this now thing called whereabouts scheme, which basically means I've got to be in somewhere for 1 hour every single day. And if I miss it, I get a dash against my name. If I get 3 dashes, it's the same as a positive test.
Nick, you made a very interesting point during the break about hypoxia tents, for instance. I mean, is that cheating?
Yeah, I think what this question is referring to is there are techniques which are perfectly legal, and the example I was using was some athletes like Paula Radcliffe and others have used what are called hypoxia tents, where basically you sleep in them and they mimic the effects of sleeping at altitude. They're not available to many nations. They're quite expensive. They're not even if you're a wealthy nation like Britain, not every athlete can afford them. They're a very expensive piece of kit. And to what extent is that stretching the bounds of fairness? And I think the answer is that this idea of there being a notional level playing field, I just don't believe it. I just don't see it. You know, Bradley Wiggins, 6'3" and 10 stone 7, is going to have certain advantages over some fat little sod like me.
But sports people are driven to try and find every advantage. You know, you dot the I's, you cross the T's, whatever it takes within the bounds of our sport.
Are the chemists, as such, always going to be one step in front? And I tried to find another word when I was asking that question, because that infers guilt.
Yeah.
But the people that work with the herbs and the, I mean, even
I think like the scheme I mentioned recently, that we're, you know, under scrutiny all the time. I think, you know, I like to feel that really Britain is leading the way in that, and across the other nations. And I think it's becoming less and less. Of course, it's always going to be a challenge. There's always going to be someone who's going to look for an advantage and look for it in the wrong way. And, you know, don't forget, okay, you talk about these altitude chambers and stuff. I've trained in them. They're not pleasant. You know, you're talking about, you know, we're talking about mimicking the heat and the altitude at different places around the world. It's not pleasant on a rowing machine for 75 minutes. Let's not forget, you've still got to do the work.
Yes.
You've still got to do the work.
Yes.
And I think that's what we've got to, you know, focus on. And from my sporting background, we're looking at trying to get an advantage, and we're looking at trying to get an advantage in how far we train. Are we training correctly? Are we eating right? Are we getting the right psychologists? Of course, we'll look at things like, can we get a better wax for the boat to make us go sail faster? Yeah. But I feel that is really in the realms of, you know, your...
Toby, is that... I'm going to come back here. Toby, is that any different? You talked about earlier about how you managed to train 4 times a week because of lottery funding. There are many athletes around the world, in your sport and other sports, who don't have that type of financial support. Is that any different? I mean, that's a massive advantage. That's transformed British sport.
It's a very valid point. Stephen, I was going to come to you before Nick made the point, which I thought was very valid. Where is the dividing line? It's a long discussion, and sadly we don't have that much time left this evening. How do you feel about the answers you've heard here?
Well, I think the nearest we ever see anything like this is usually in tennis. They actually do it on courtside. I watch Andy Murray and he drinks a pink bottle, a blue bottle and a red bottle, and then he has a little file he rips the top off and necks that down his neck, and he finishes off with a banana. So whatever he's taking, I'd like some myself, to be honest with you.
Will it help you backhand?
It gives me the strength to play for 4 and 5 hours. You know, I mean, phenomenal athletes, but what's in the bottles?
That's the situation, really, James, isn't it? I mean, it's where does the banana cease to be a banana, but becomes an additional device to help you achieve?
That's it, isn't it? I mean, you know, it doesn't matter what sport we talk about. Every sportsman, it's ingrained in them to try and find an edge, whatever that may be, in terms of training methods, right through to nutrition or anything else, wax on the boat, whatever it may be, you know. And this is just human nature to try and self-improve in that way, and people are going to push the boundaries, and every now and again somebody's going to overstep the line. But that's what sport's about. It's competitive, and you look for everything you can. I mean, we talk about the oxygen tents, but you know, maybe what Paul is trying to do, or people who use those are trying to do, is actually not gain advantage, but restore parity with people who are actually able to train at high altitudes or in the heat consistently, which we don't have, although we're having it at the moment. We don't have it here normally.
It's not for very much longer. Steve, I'm going to have to say thank you to you for the question that we could have spent hours answering, and I'm sure we'll discuss again in the not-too-distant future. I understand you're a Man City fan, by the way, so well done.
Have you noticed? Yeah.
Yeah, just a little, just a little bit.
Cut him off.
So thanks again, mate. Hope to speak to you again.
That doesn't cheat, by the way. They're all physically fit human beings.
Yeah, they're all in hypoxia chambers apparently at the moment. Gentlemen, we're going to a break. We'll pick this up again shortly. Stephen, thank you very much. Please don't go away. We've only got a few minutes left, and we've got something interesting to talk about. See you very shortly. And welcome back for the final time tonight to Sports Tonight's The Forum. I want to pick up with Tony. We had some conversations at the end there about drugs and enhancement and the differentiation between performance support and overstepping that mark. As an athlete, you must find this really difficult because you've got to consider media management. We've had that discussion tonight. What you can and cannot do with Twitter. Your own body enhancement fuels have got to be correct to the I dot and T cross, and your performance, and your lifestyle. Yeah. And somewhere in the middle of all this is your management of your own financial circumstances, which, as we well know, in the Olympic arena is normally not that great. Yeah. How do you guys do this?
It takes a while, actually, and I mean, that's why I think I was very fortunate enough to go and visit some of the guys who are going to be participating in the rowing in a couple of days' time today. And, you know, if I think about all those guys, you're looking at some of them 2-3 Olympiads, and you don't suddenly get all the tools you need in your toolbox overnight, and it takes experience. And no one on those start line are going to be in a situation where they've just turned up last year. They would have been doing it for years. And that just takes experience, and you know, you've got to be technically right on the button. You've got to be absolutely at your top game in fitness, and you've got to make sure that you've left no stone unturned in your
make it
quest of perfection.
At the moment that really counts.
You've got about 210 strokes to make it happen for you, and you either. And I was doing some maths on it the other day, and it works out if you were to just train for 4 years, it'd be about 29-30 hours per stroke for 210 strokes. Wow. So if you mess one stroke up, that's what you've lost.
You see, that's where it really matters, when these guys go out there and they do what they do, and I just think we should pay tribute to everyone who's taking part in London 2012, all over the world in all the sports, but London 2012, just listen to some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you're going to watch. There's a gentleman that's going to come and join us in a minute, and we're just going to talk generally at the end of this about London 2012 and actually how it is and how it's come to be. Nick, you were there in the early days of it. 7 years in the making. Is it what you thought it was going to be? Has it got to a place where you forecast 7 years ahead in your crystal ball and went, yeah, actually, if it's that, then I'm happy it's achieved?
Yes, I think we set some very ambitious targets when Seb spoke in Singapore in 2005, and I think we're about to achieve most of them, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm organising 5 of the Olympic events and 1 of the Paralympic events, so I might be slightly biased here. You know, one of the events that we're putting on is the Olympic marathons, massive crowds, one of the free events. So I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think that we're going to put on a fantastic spectacle.
I agree, by the way. Just before I turn to you, James, we were going to have somebody on the phone, but we've got some technical problems at the moment, so we're going to just discuss the last 2 or 3 minutes amongst ourselves. Just to let you know, the final score at Old Trafford was Team GB 1, Senegal 1. You've watched it as well. You've seen it from a different perspective from Nick. Is it everything that you thought it was going to be so far?
I think that, going back to what I kind of said earlier, you know, the scale, people just will not appreciate the scale until you actually get there and you see it, and it will just consume you in a great way, and it will you know, wash over you. It's a fantastic time to be in London, and I think that everything that I've seen so far, I've seen a few of the. I mean, I tend to drive past the Olympic Park, and I've sort of seen it grow, you know, over the last few years, and just to see it now come to fruition. To say I went to pick up my accreditation earlier this week, and just to have a bit of a wander around, and it's just incredible. I think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for everybody to get involved. Everybody who's got tickets, obviously fantastic, but people who haven't, you know, to go and enjoy and really embrace the spirit of it. I think it's going to be fantastic.
It's so great to hear you say that. And we knock ourselves in this country, but I have to say I saw that scrap of land when Seb and the team came back about 3 weeks afterwards, and I just think it's astonishing what has been achieved. Before we had the last few words from you, Toby, Brazil beat Egypt 3-2 tonight in the other game. As an athlete, as a former athlete, as a world champion, you must be seriously proud. First of all, you must be excited about what's going to happen, but you must be seriously proud of what your city has achieved.
Absolutely, and just actually talking about Nick's London Marathon briefly, you go down, and I've actually supported it. I've never run it myself, and I've just gone and watched it, and it's absolutely fantastic, and it makes you choke a little bit when you see people perform.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
We've now got this for 2 weeks, every single day, and I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch, and I hope it touches people who are not infused in sport, and I hope it opens up areas or other sports that people didn't know anything about, and actually, oh, we're quite good at that. I didn't even know that sport existed. And
I want to have a go.
And have a go.
Yeah,
I'm going down to see sports I've not seen before. You know, I'm really looking forward to the weightlifting.
Yeah.
You know, I've never seen that before. I'm going to go see some diving. I can't wait. I'm just going to get involved.
Fabulous.
And if I haven't got a ticket, I'm still going to be down there anyway, trying to peer over, look at the big screens, whatever I can do, just to try and soak up as much as I can.
It's a fantastic. Toby's absolutely right. It's a fantastic moment to Toby Garbett, who actually is one of our great world champions and one of the best physical education people that I've ever met, to James Olley, a seriously good journalist who's going to report these games and bring them into your living rooms, and to Nick Patel, one of the big administrators in our game, and who has so successfully run the London Marathon, not personally, may I add, but in many guises for many years, and one of this country's top sports lawyers. It's been an amazingly successful and fun programme. I think it's been successful, but I'm slightly biased. It's been a great time to spend with you every Thursday night for the last few weeks. Go and enjoy the games, and this is the most magnificent time in our country for a very long time. I wish you all only joy, lots of medals, and a lot of fun over the next few weeks. Thanks for joining us. Hope we see you again soon. Take care. Good night.